I mentioned at the end of my 1.8 review that it competed with 1.6.1 for second worst chapter of Part 1. What I didn't mention is which chapter takes the big prize. If you haven't already figured it out by now, it's Chapter 1.9. The high concept for this chapter makes complete sense. The Black Knight is a legendary figure from Path of Radiance, and getting to play as the Black Knight is a no-doubt slam-dunk wow moment. Unfortunately, while seeing the Black Knight completely obliterate everything that comes his way is definitely cool, the power fantasy is severely undercut by the level design in 3 key ways. First, the terrain slows him to a crawl. Moving 2 to 3 spaces at a time doesn't feel very powerful, and worse, can make it impossible for him to cover Micaiah if an enemy pops up from the rear. Second, the combination of Fog of War and the need to protect Micaiah forces the player to play very cautiously, in a way that's antithetical to the aforementioned power fantasy. As an aside, Fog of War in Fire Emblem is a very poor way to increase challenge in the vast majority of cases. I would probably need to make a separate video to really do justice to the topic, but suffice to say that I'm not at all sad that the mechanic seems to have been left behind in the transition to the 3DS era. Third, the need for caution is exacerbated by enemy reinforcements that spawn into the fog, including into areas of the map that the player has already explored. Even Jared himself manages to appear in a tile visible from the player's starting location, meaning a player who understandably assumes he's somewhere on the map already could spend ages searching for him in vain elsewhere, especially if they don't realize reinforcements have shown up in an area they've already visited. This all adds up to a chapter that is very tedious to complete without a guide. The player either needs to spend a lot of extra turns creeping very slowly around the map, or play by trial and error with numerous restarts if they want to complete the map within a reasonable number of turns. This contrasts sharply with maps like 1.8 with Nyla or 4.5 with Tabarn, where the player can send a powerful unit to obliterate swaths of enemies without either the requirement to do so or the tedium introduced by 1.9's constraints. It's also worth noting that most, if not all, of the enemies in this chapter can one round, if not one hit, kill a Micaiah with a reasonable amount of training. Yet training Micaiah has little long-term value past this chapter. Punishing the player for not training her, or encouraging veterans to train her just for the sake of this map, seems odd at best. I don't think 1.9 would actually be very difficult to fix. The initial conditions could be much the same, but I would make a couple of changes to the way the level progresses from there. First, there is dialogue where Jared mentions dousing torches. Lighting torches on the map to increase vision is a mechanic used in several of Radiant Dawn's other Fog of War maps, and should absolutely be present here. Second, there should not be reinforcements spawning into areas the player has already visited. This could combine nicely with the previous point if reinforcements could not spawn into lit areas. The player could progress around the level lighting the various torches, and once the whole area is lit, Jared could appear with no need to route the remaining mooks. Third, making the terrain even slightly more traversable would be incredibly helpful. Having plenty of cover and trees makes sense both from a story standpoint and to provide Micaiah a way to hide so the Black Knight can screen her. But giving the Black Knight at least one clear path around the level would be invaluable for reducing the tedium. In my recent playthrough, I spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out how to even hit the BXP threshold, and ended up finishing in 11 turns, on a tiny 8x9 map. Considering this is basically a side chapter, it has no business requiring more turns than every chapter that precedes it. With these changes, you could probably clear the level in as few as 4 or 5 turns without compromising the big wow moment in any way. Overall, this chapter is awful, and is my pick for worst chapter not only in Part 1, but the entire game. For me, the only thing it has going for it, relative to other bad chapters, is that it's fast enough to play that playing it 10 times still takes less time than playing a Part 4 map twice. But given how monotonous the experience of playing this chapter is, that isn't enough to save it.